this is a piece that's critical for us to ensure success for all kids. Helping our teachers understand what are some of the things that they can do to monitor their own practice, helping administrators know how to support teachers in that work, and then from our office really being there side by side with our teachers, helping and coaching them along the way. In terms of the relationships piece, which hopefully relationships has sort of been embedded in a lot of stuff I've been talking about this morning, how important I think that part of the work is. One of the things that we really like to do for our greater community, whether it's parents or those members of our community who don't have kids in kids' schools, is providing some professional learning opportunities for them. You know, I'm just reflecting on when I was in the classroom and, you know, telling parents, you know, read to your child every night. Here's what our reading and math curriculum looks like. And they want to do all those things. They want to do the best for their kids. But sometimes having to learn the new math, right, or the way that we're doing balanced literacy can get daunting and overwhelming. So we want to provide professional learning for parents that focus, not to say that other stuff goes away, but really focusing on some essential skills that they can help support at home that really begins to shape this child that enters our buildings every day, that enters the workforce, you know, 15 years, 10 years from now. And a part of that work will be around this idea of effective effort and attribution retraining. I know that there's been work done with mindsets, but I want to build on that and really help parents understand what are the 6 elements of effective effort, what does that look like, how do you provide feedback, how do you talk to your child about when they can't make up their bed, because they can't get, I don't know about you, but you can't get over there in the corner all that well to pull the sheet down. How do we teach kids to know how to persevere? How do we teach them to know how to identify appropriate resources and support? How do we teach them to advocate for what they need? And there are really some, I think, just changing our language, changing how we respond, and changing our language in the sense of, gosh, you're such a smart kid, to really saying, wow, I really appreciate how hard you worked on that. I really like the way you put forth, you know, incredible effort to get this work done. And I think if our parents are practicing that at home, we have the same expectations in the school building. We're going to see shifts in how our children show up for us every day. Another piece in terms of relationships, and I didn't speak to this with each element of this 8-step process and where we're headed, but this, you know, takes a village, and all the communities in the district have a role to play. I've already made connections with our assessment folks, spent time with our research folks, because we really do want to make sure if we're saying that this is going to make a difference, that we're thinking about what's the data and the evidence we need to collect on the back end to demonstrate how this makes a difference. Is that a timer for me?
I would offer to, this may be a great time to pause for questions or thoughts if there's very good information to see how we process it.
Yeah, so I love everything you're talking about. It's fantastic. I wonder, when you're talking about curriculum and talking about assessments, and I don't know, so I'm thinking that there is no district adopted curriculum for every subject. So for example, if we have math, there are different schools that are doing different curriculum, or is everybody doing the same exact curriculum? And if not, then how then, I could see a challenge aligning, right, what that looks like. So I mean, I would love to see, I mean, to me it just makes sense to have a district, but I know districts don't, so not just this one. So I wonder how you would then, or are you looking at something going towards a district adopted curriculum? So there could be, you know, you've got teachers teaching things that, well, at least my experience, teachers teaching the same subject, but very different ways, different things. So how then is there an alignment with that as well as collaboration? I mean, I love it. I can see it being a huge lift and a whole belief shift.
So, so that, I think that's such a significant question. Just in the month and a half that I've been here, one of the things that's been very clear is that we do have a district curriculum. There are resources that are there. There are instructional frameworks from the grade level. There's a curriculum center. Where I think we have a gap is depending on when you entered the KSD district, could determine whether or not you've been exposed to those same resources. One of the things that I learned at the leadership retreat, working with our principals, is that they weren't aware of some of these resources. And that's not to say that this information hasn't been communicated, but I think that this is going to be a great opportunity for us to partner with Melissa and leveraging her team's expertise about messaging, right? It's one thing to see it in an email. It's one thing to hear it in a presentation, amongst the million other presentations that you've had. I think that there are other avenues that we haven't really tackled to really make sure that our principals understand this is our curriculum. This is what we're expecting teachers to teach. Here's how we're going to support teachers in accessing that curriculum, understanding how to navigate the tools and resources that are there. And here's how I'm going to help you, building administrator, know what you should be looking for in the classroom to see evidence that this is taking hold. So when I talk about the shifts that need to happen, one is just understanding change, right? If you've been doing this the same way, and you feel like you have the results to support it, and that the district kind of expecting you to change that is taking away your creativity and flexibility, we have to work on that. And it's not to say that it's just a switch that flips on. It takes time to help adults get on board with any new initiative. So that would be our work, really focusing on how are we generating buy-in, how are we clear about expectations, and a timeline for implementation. You're not going to do everything all at once right now, but maybe we'll do this one small piece. And let's do that, and we'll support that and monitor it with fidelity before we add on additional layers. Did I answer your question?
And you partially answered the question that I was going to have, but I think, that, and again, as presented, you may have a lot more information and you don't have enough time to present everything you want to present. But as you go through those 8 steps and you talk about that transition, I think that the first concern I have is that there's a lot of barriers that will exist between each transition point, each step in that circle, and then between the slide that going from the left to the right. And then I hear you have a plan to address them, but I think my concern is that we've not identified all the barriers and also don't have a plan to overcome those barriers. And that's just the knowledge I have, not the knowledge you have, or the plan that you're already going to do. So I think that's where, as we go forward, that's what I want to make sure that we look at is making sure we identify whatever those areas of resistance are, and then we have a plan to get over. Because where we want to go, I think, it is the story to go, but you got to start where you are and figure out what that gap is and figure out the gap there.
So one of the things, and I'll share this slide a little bit later, is how we plan to approach this. We can't sit in this room and make these decisions, right? So really thinking about who will be a part of our cabinet team, leveraging the cross-representation from all of those folks to help generate buy-in, seeking out and developing focus groups with our building administrators, teachers who represent a variety of areas, including our paraprofessionals, because we want to be smart about this. There's nothing worse than rolling out a new initiative and failing before you even get started. So it's important for us to pace ourselves. So we're going to start small, right? We're going to start small, and at the same time, look at the structures that are already in place that we can begin to collect data on. So how big would this shift or lift be? for teachers and building administrators to make this happen. And being very careful and thoughtful in how we present that. And the most critical piece in all of this is that we're in buildings helping along the way. We're part of those planning conversations. If you want to try this for the first time in your classroom and you want somebody by your side to help you through this, or you just want me to watch and see what you do and tell you like what those next steps might be, that's our work. So I think barriers to change, it's not something that we've lost sight of, but I think just haven't had a chance to meet with teachers yet and get to the buildings. The first part of this work is doing that work, seeing what's currently happening, and then really being thoughtful about what would it take to begin to make those shifts.
Thanks.
So I have a question. So if we're looking at barriers and if we're looking at strategies, when you mentioned teacher collaboration, I didn't hear collaboration amongst the SEL, social emotional learning groups, so the psychologists and the counselors, and so I know that has been a strategy in the past where they all get together and discuss specific student activities. Is that part of it?
Yes, so one of the pieces that's embedded in this work, so when I still consider myself a teacher, so maybe when I say teacher collaboration, maybe I should change that to educator collaboration, right? One of the things that's embedded in this work, and once we really begin to tease out some of the details, is that everybody in the building has a role to play in this. Everybody in the building is a part of one of these teams that's talking about student performance and the work. Every teacher in the building is engaged in tutorial and enrichment sessions. So we're not excluding PE, we're not excluding some of our elective areas, we're not excluding our ELL support teachers. Everyone has a role to play, and they're all a part of this collaborative team.
And one more question.
Sure.
That's regarding the assessments, and you mentioned that you would develop the formative. We have some
Yes.
now, but are we expanding on that, or not having additional? But
So
how are we changing?
So really, where I'd like to go are building in checks for understanding and teasing those out for teachers. There's some things that are sort of embedded in how the curriculum is written, but really pointing out for our teachers as we're learning alongside them. So you see what you did right there? That's giving you some information that's going to inform how you need to follow up with this kid later, or how you might need to think about adjusting your strategies for students like this. And so when I'm thinking about building in assessments, I'm starting with what's currently happening in the classroom every day. There are so many opportunities to check in on how kids are processing and engaging with the instruction that's happening, and using that information to inform how we might need to exemplify that practice or think about doing it differently.
When we're looking at the literacy curriculum that we have, the materials that we've purchased for, say, elementary or elementary school. I know there are pacing guides, there are teacher guides, this is how I teach the lesson. How much latitude, again, going back to looking at the different ways kids learn, how much latitude are teachers going to have to stray from the way the book teaches, to teach it, and still hold on to the power standard? How much guidance are they going to have? How much?
Of what that flexibility looks
Yeah.
like. So that's the power of those collaborative teams. And one of the things just in the literature, like you'll see that this 8-step process or this continuous quality improvement process, depending on which program you're looking at, is kind of embedded in there already. So in terms of that flexibility, as a team, if we're sitting down and we know, like for our kids, this isn't working, what other effective practices should we look at or consider what other resources do we need to build in to make sure that we have the opportunity to engage all kids? So the flexibility happens at that team level. So if the team gets together and plans and identifies an area where they need to shift how the pacing is mapped out, the team owns that decision. And at the same time, they're accountable for that decision. And a part of that accountability piece is then when we look at student work, then when we look at our checks for understanding or those assessment pieces, did that shift make the difference that we thought it would? And if they're stuck, that's where we're here, right? That's why we're here, to go in and help and support them and thinking about doing that differently. And there are a variety of ways, job-embedded learning designs that help them engage in that investigative practice. One of the things that we don't want to take away is the curiosity that we need every teacher to have. We need teachers to be curious every day about what this kid is thinking, what they need, why are they doing that, and they need to maintain that curiosity to stay engaged and connected with children.
I love the fact that, again, this conversation is one that we need to continue to have. Personal point, I would say that certainly feel free to take photos of slides. We'll be making sure that each word you can say slide that, or as part of our ongoing communication, make sure you have what you need to be informed and stay informed. To some earlier questions, I know you still have part of your presentation. I think it's important to note.
It's a good response.
Absolutely. This is important to note a couple of discussion points. Ross, your question about barriers is duly noted, and I thought about specific examples. So when we talk about barriers, perceived barriers, real barriers, actual barriers, when I think about the specific example of academic freedom, this is what the conversation that we talked about, just touched on. The difference between what and how, and the difference between, as you mentioned, curriculum, curriculum and standards. So the standard is what all of our students should know and be able to do at one certain point. The curriculum serves as that beacon to get us there. What we've run into, the barriers we've run into, at least in my brief tenure, and I think about these conversations, many of our educators have believed that we have freedom in the what. The what needs to be taught. So I love this lesson I've had for the last 17 years. I'm going to keep using this about the Amazon rainforest, even though it doesn't meet the standard. So the academic freedom that we need to make sure that shift, that barrier needs to be not in the what. So the standard is what students should know. The freedom is in how we provide that instruction. And that's one of our fundamental shifts that the state process will allow us to at least change that mindset.
Yeah, I would really love this conversation to continue. I know we're limited to the 30 minutes, but this is the heart.
So can I ask something?
Absolutely. No.
So I appreciate the fact that the shifts, right, of thinking students and student advocating, there's great value to that. I'm wondering what we've thought about as far as when you're talking about the professional opportunities on the slide that you have up here, of how we can leverage our other partners. Like, I know our PTAs and things are really hungry on how they can help provide information to parents and how we leverage some of the things. I know the Early Learning Center did quite a few things where they brought in community and had people, and that was well received, and I know math nights have been well received, but how do we help make those so it's a focused area so that we can have parents know how to help their students?
So that's one of the things that we're committed to. I'm sure you know my team is relatively new, and we are meeting next week to really begin to put some meat on the bones, right? To really talk through what would this rollout look like. We've identified a couple of pieces that we know, like for parents, that we could provide, but we can continue that. We can continue to do this similarly to how there are math and literacy nights in the school. We can have one here where parents get to really engage in unpacking the curriculum and understanding maybe some things that could be misconceptions about what and how we teach, and have some support on some of the things that maybe looks brand new. We have, wasn't part of my educational experience. Why are we doing it this way? Have the opportunity to ask those questions. Not only that, but what I think is really important is to show the research base that's driving our decisions. Like, these aren't just, this is just in my back pocket and I thought it'd be fun to do. We're doing this because there's a body of research that supports making the shift in our practice.
One more thing is, I listening to what you're saying, the other thing that I think is important, we've talked about for years, is that early childhood, right? So how do we help? I know even in my own family, right, my one daughter-in-law goes, young parent, right, she's a 3-year-old, and she goes, I don't have the resources that I need to tell how I can start helping. So, a big difference between my kids and their families, one is in education, and so they have all these early strategies, and they're sharing among them, but how do we help our families learn those things so that our kids go there? There's no parent handbook, as we all know, right, that says, okay, tell your kid this, tell your kid this, and they'll be ready for school. So how do we as an organization help our parents learn those skills that they need? And I know it's important, and it's also, someone could argue, well, it's enhancement, it's not our core work, but I think it is our core work because our students, a 3-year-old is going to be our student in 2 years, so how do we help with that?
So I think that that's part of our communication effort. And, I've been looking at what some neighboring districts, don't know your name, have been doing to get an idea of how are they framing this for parents? What does it look like? And as a parent, like as I'm looking at it, does this tell me what my child is learning and how I can support? And I've seen some really good examples. And, the true education spirit, I'll borrow some of those examples and, use that same structure and format to develop some of those resources for our parents. One of the charge when I joined the team, Dr. Watts made very clear is that there is an expectation around community involvement and providing these types of opportunities for our parents, for our greater external community, with the early learning piece specifically that actually falls in my area. And although we don't have a person who could do some of that kind of management pieces anymore, we own it. So me and my director, we've already sat down and talked about how are we going to make sure that we're continuing to support the work that was done for Ready for K, right? We spent some time at KVELC earlier this week looking at the resources that are there and readily available. We just have to build a schedule to invite our community partners from our preschools and help them unpack and understand what are some things that they can take back and do so when those kids enter KSD, they're prepped and ready to go.
And I think that's where we can leverage partnerships as well, because coming from the KSD, 40% of their work is built. So we can leverage that information, and I did a lot of that communication there, so leveraging what's already built. Borrowing is the word. And leveraging what's built there, so.
Just to add to that, we have more kids who are not in preschool than are in preschool, and so we need to think about how we get to those families.
And sharing that information, resources, and partnerships with the libraries and the free resources that are out there for and
Pediatricians and things like that.
Absolutely, that's already available. It's never too early, so when parents, when babies are born, begin that conversation. That's their materials. We talked about the trajectory. So what is it that our family should know about how a child developmental, what should she or he be able to do? And yes, there's always going to be a span and some sort of continue throughout the years. We want to inform our parents as early as possible. One of those opportunities to inform in a different way is through our cabinet. So as we continue to, this continuous quality improvement is not just focused on teaching and learning. It's our mission goal. So how do we continue to improve? Our cabinet, which is an extension of our executive cabinet team, helps us this morning. So we've taken stock of who's not there, who's not gain access to this information, it needs to be invited. So we have now not only key stakeholders within our staff, but also key stakeholders in the community, key stakeholders within our regulators. And one of those partners includes PTSA representative who will be part of our cabinet meetings. And so as we talk about the core business of our work, we want to make sure that each one of our community members are leaving with information, also have access to share two-way. Important. We want to share that.
So I'm just gonna skip through, so this is at a high level, you know, what that implementation plan could look like. And of course, everything on this will adjust based on what happens in this first step, right? When we're working with our focus groups, when we're doing our school visits, as we are collecting data and digging deeply, like what's the root cause behind some of the things that we're seeing. And one part of the work that will start immediately is with our C&I team, is like, when we look at this process and look at what we currently have in place, what are some gaps that we already see? And we can start doing that work now. You know, talked about, you know, partnering with schools. And then maybe, you know, again, thinking about, you know, starting small. Maybe we start with a select group of teachers and support those teachers in implementing this process. We take a look at what the results of that is before we extend or grow, move that to scale. And then of course, we're always looking for evidence of effectiveness in adjusting our plan and our efforts to make sure that it's a great match for teachers, it's a great match for students. I also thought it'd be important to, this is kind of an overwhelming slide, apologies, but I also thought it'd be important to look at how does this align to some of the other things that we have in our district. First, taking a look at self-ID, like how our teachers are evaluated currently, what's the alignment to this process and what they're expected to do anyway. So I don't think that there's a place on self-ID where this 8 steps doesn't match. And I've tried to tease out specifically what areas in this 8-step process, and when we're talking about implementing this work and communicating this with teachers, making sure that they understand this is the work that you're doing. These are the expectations for performance. Now we're providing some guidance on how you can do this. This is an area where you've struggled in the past, or this is an area you've identified and you'd like to grow, or this is an area where you're excelling. We got to leverage that and make sure that we're using those experts and partnering with them with those that are struggling. And if you're familiar with Hattie's research, thinking about what has the greatest effect on student performance. And I really just started with the top 20. I'm sure we did a little bit more, went beyond to everything that was at 0.4 or above. We see a lot more of these elements in here. And so what we're talking about is what research says effective schools do. And I think staying grounded in that and how we communicate this transition to this type, to move shifting our work this way, I think is going to be critical.
So one of the things I haven't seen, and I'm thinking it's in here, is when we're talking about equity and culture, responsible instruction practices and those types of things, because I think we've been trying to figure out a way to tie those practices with our self-ID work. And so how does that fit into, because we know that's going to have to be an issue, right? We're going to have to include some culture, responsible instruction practices and responsibilities. So where do you see that fitting because that's a whole, right, that's a belief system, it's all of those pieces that we have to implement. So where do you see that kind of fitting, or is there a place where, I mean, I see classroom culture, but is there a place where you see that fitting?
Actually, that's going to be our third column. So I've had the opportunity to work with Gary Howard.
Yes.
And I'm hoping for the opportunity to learn for free. Yeah, I have yes. So I can be trained on this. So I've spent, in my previous work, there was a partnership that allowed me to really work with some of the experts in that area. So Red Hammond, Gary Howard, but I'm like deeply studying because I don't want to put any, it's such a complex body of knowledge, and it's so important that we get it right. I didn't want to put it up here too prematurely, but that's exactly where we're headed next, is thinking about what does culturally relevant pedagogy look like. And a part of this is brain research and tying that in specifically to how we help teachers understand each phase of this process. If they don't understand the purpose and the why behind it, then it just becomes kind of like this sort of robotic implementation, right? We're doing each of the steps, but you don't understand, if you don't fully understand the meaning behind why we're saying do it this way or use this particular resource. So that piece is what's coming next and how we map this. I think I'm going to skip over this and that. Oh, this is the end. So I did want to touch on probably some other questions that you have regarding teaching and learning because they didn't come up. But I know that they're on your minds in terms of our itinerant teachers. That schedule went out on Friday. On Thursday, the teachers we sent out their homeschool information to building administrators and the teachers. And then on Friday, we sent their actual schedule, recognizing that that's probably going to be shifting a little bit. There'll be some adjustments over the next few weeks. We are looking at where we are with out-of-district placements for our IE students. We're approaching it in two ways. We're looking at cost and we're looking at process. Think about it that way. And in terms of cost, what we're trying to figure out is because for some of the needs of our kids, is this